If you haven't heard, the financial system is crashing and we aren't going to be able to solve this one like 2008. So in today's video, I'm going to explain what's happening right now, how we got here, and what's coming next, so you can prepare and position yourself to take advantage of the crash. Now let's get started. Hey, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Rick Harrison and I'm an accredited home buying specialist here in Southwest Florida. So on this channel, I bring you the tips, tools, and tours to help you decide if this is the right time and place to make your move to paradise. So if that thought's crossed your mind at some point, take the first step towards making it happen and subscribe so you don't miss out on the key piece of information that unlocks the dream. By now, many of you will have heard about bits and pieces of what I'll be talking about in today's video, some of it from mainstream media, some from popular financial and real estate YouTubers, and even some from those crazy conspiracy theorists who are just crazy, of course, right? Well, not entirely. But in today's video, I'll be putting together all those pieces so you can truly understand the inner workings of the system we live in. And if you can really get this today, you'll be able to identify the cycles in real time and begin the journey towards learning how to take advantage of them. But before I dive in, I have to give you my disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor, lawyer, or accountant, and I'm also not currently your real estate agent, so please consult with any and all of these professionals prior to making any legal moves or financial moves. And please, feel free to pick apart this narrative, tell me what I'm forgetting, correct my mistakes, but above all, do your own research and test the ideas I present. All right, now let's dive on in. First, financial system basics. In order for you to understand what is going on right now in the financial system and how we got here, you first need to understand the basics of how the financial system works. And it's not quite what most people think it is. For example, would it surprise you to hear me call it a pyramid scheme? That's right. As many of you are probably familiar, a pyramid scheme is a form of investment in which each paying participant recruits two further participants, with returns being given to earlier participants using money contributed by the later participants. And we all saw the entire house of cards collapse with Enron. So how is the financial system likened to a pyramid scheme? The fractional reserve banking system works very similar to a pyramid scheme now, but it didn't always. At one point in history, we bartered with each other. Each person's labor or goods was exchanged for someone else's labor or goods. As time went on and civilization developed, trade routes and machinery to make life easier for the group as a whole, bartering wasn't really as effective or efficient. At some point, the cobbler needed food, but the farmer didn't need any more shoes. So the system shifted to a currency or a store of value. At first it was silver, then when that commodity couldn't keep up with the growth, it shifted to gold. When gold couldn't keep up, it shifted to silver and gold certificates, which were redeemable for silver and gold. Then when the certificates couldn't keep up, it shifted to treasury notes, which is a completely fiat currency, meaning it is backed by nothing but our faith in the US government, and that's what we are using today. They're no longer redeemable or backed by gold. The only things that are backed by gold and silver are the gold and silver certificates that are used by central banks, and those were outlawed for the public back in 1933 when the Republic of the United States first filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So if the banking system works like a pyramid scheme, why don't we change it? Well, because as of now, it's the only system we currently have that forces growth. And in life, if it's not growing, it's dying. Consider your muscles. When you were a child, your genes forced growth in some way, shape, or form. Your body grew, your mind grew, your strength grew. It just happened because it was part of your genetic makeup. But around your 20s, you start to hit a plateau where growth doesn't just automatically happen, and instead, you actually have to start working to keep up with the body you had. Time starts to work against you, and the more time that goes by, the more you have to work on your strength, your flexibility, your eating habits. If you don't, your muscles just start to weaken, your mind and metabolism start to slow, joints start aching, you know the deal. Your body begins to actually decline and slowly die. Let me know if this is making sense to you in the comments. The fractional reserve system is similar to this. It forces growth in the economy, in production, and in people. When the Federal Reserve says they have a target inflation rate of 2%, they're talking about the forced growth. They're aiming to continually expand the money supply 2%, but simultaneously that devalues the money 2% and increases debt 2%. But I'll talk about those two caveats a little bit later. So if we want the world to continue growing, population to continue growing, advances in technology and health to continue growing, the money supply needs to continue growing. If it didn't, and we had a finite amount of dollars in existence, then each dollar in existence would become more and more scarce and more valuable. If each dollar became more and more scarce and more valuable, do you think anybody would be spending them? No. The system would come to a complete halt in the economy, and therefore the world would stop growing as a result. So what's going on right now and how did we get here? Now that we've established that the money supply needs to keep growing so that the world can keep growing, we can talk about those two caveats. The fact that the currency has to be continually devalued by 2%, and debt needs to continue increasing by 2%. Those are inherent flaws in the system. So let's start with the debt and what it really is. Debt is a future obligation of payment with interest. It also happens to be where money creation of the new money begins that allows for the 2% expansion of the money supply. Here's how. It used to be that when you put your money into a bank, they would actually pay you interest to keep it there because they were lending out your money to other customers or entities as loans. They charged those borrowers interest on the loan, and the bank gave you a percentage of that interest for allowing them to loan out your money. In the fractional reserve system, the Federal Reserve determines how much a bank needs to keep in reserves. For example, 10% of customer money needs to be kept liquid at the bank to account for daily withdrawals and deposits in a typical functioning market. The rest of the money is lent out to other customers or businesses in the form of loans or is invested in things like bonds and treasuries. But the interesting thing about the fractional reserve system is that it actually allows money to be created out of thin air. For example, let's say you and 4 other customers each have $2,000 in the bank. If the bank borrows 10% from each of the 5 accounts to create a $1,000 loan for the borrower, there's still $2,000 in each of the accounts. The bank didn't take away your money. It is just being leveraged to provide funding to someone else in hopes of making a profit for the bank and you as the creditor. This is why banks used to pay you interest on your accounts. But essentially, that $1,000 loan was just created out of thin air. This is how the money supply continually expands, but also why debt and devaluation continues to increase as well. But it doesn't just stop there. If they created that $1,000 out of thin air and that money has to be paid back with interest, where does the interest come from? It can only come from one of 3 places, and it depends on what kind of financial personality that borrower has. The spender, the saver, and the investor. The borrower usually falls into one of 3 categories. They are either a spender, a saver, or an investor. If you can think of one I'm forgetting, please let me know in the comments section, but this was all I could come up with. If they're a saver, they usually don't enter into debt very often, because they choose to pay for it through what they have saved. And if they can't afford it, they usually won't buy it. But if they do, they'll usually pay it back as agreed to from their earnings and savings over time. The system mainly hinges on the other 2 personalities, the spenders and the investors. And this is where the income gap comes into play and why it keeps widening. If they're a spender, then they'll tend to pay it back through their future time, energy, or income. They may also look for more opportunities to make money to get out of their hole, and in so doing, actually borrow more to take advantage of the opportunity, only digging themselves into a deeper hole. At some point, the hole might get too big to get out of, where their earnings can no longer support the interest of the debts that they have incurred. This type of situation usually leads to insolvency and some type of form of bankruptcy. And if they're an investor, then they might fall into one of 2 types. They might be a straight up investor, or they might be an entrepreneur. A straight up investor finds ways to make their money make more money so that the income generated pays off their debts for them and generates the income they need to live the lifestyle they want. An entrepreneur, on the other hand, finds ways to build a business that becomes their means to pay off their debts and generate the income they need to live the lifestyle they want. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So after the shutdown in 2020, what data do you think we got back from that experiment? We saw some of the highest rates of divorce, domestic abuse, and births because people were around each other more than normal, and it either magnified their love or their resentment. We saw some of the highest historical housing prices and rental rates. Everyone wanted to move while they had the chance, and everyone thought remote work was the new norm. We saw US companies post record profits because spenders went out and of course spent. We saw the largest amount of bank savings in history because all the savers did just that and put their money away for a rainy day. We saw speculative investments, SPACs, and stocks artificially balloon to the point that unprofitable startups were raising astronomical and ridiculous valuations and stock prices. Why? Because all the investors invested their money. But all that borrowing, spending, and investing while production was halted led to declining supply lines with rising demand, which means prices rise. And the more prices rose, the more money people borrowed, invested, or saved. The Fed thought this spiral was a temporary cycle that would play itself out and return to the mean. But after way too many people called for intervention, the Fed finally realized that this inflation wasn't stopping. So within 6 months, they raised the Fed rates 3%, which doesn't sound like all that much, but consider that it was a 100% increase after a decade-long addiction to low rates being the norm. That brings us to today and what is coming next. The economy is slowing, banks aren't originating as many loans, and many of them don't have the liquidity they need to maintain the rising demand for currency in today's inflation-ridden economy. Banks start to show cracks, and then rumors start circling. Suddenly, some bigger clients start to withdraw their money, seeing the writing on the wall, and that triggers more rumors, and people start getting nervous and withdraw their money, and then poof, the bank is gone, and with it, people's money. This downward spiral has been forcing the government to come up with more ways to plug the holes in the system, which means inflating the money more and more until eventually a reset becomes necessary. With the world economies now interconnected due to the restructuring of them after 2008, if the US has financial problems or the dollar has financial problems, the whole world does. We have all been dependent on one another for resources. And this is part of what's going on overseas and why BRICS nations are working on their own currency to get out from under the dollar, so they are not directly tied to the US and have greater control over their country's economy. But the Federal Reserve already has a CBDC that has been working on and tested over for the last few years that's set to be rolled out this July according to white papers published by the White House. They're supposed to begin rolling out parts of it in the coming weeks. There has been a lot of speculation as to how this shift will occur, but some say it could happen just like 1933, where there was a long 4-day banking holiday, all banks were shut down, and the rollout occurred digitally over those 4 days. That really remains for time to tell, but essentially the system has to evolve, and digital currency is what is coming next. You can already see it happening in some industries and businesses. They're no longer accepting cash. Walmart and Home Depot, for example, have self-checkouts that do not allow any cash. Banks don't give out many coins anymore due to the coin shortages. We'll be seeing a lot of big changes within the next couple of years. Not only currency, but technology and the way the world interacts with itself. Meta will become mainstream, and just a little FYI, the metaverse has nothing to do with Facebook. Facebook has something to do with the metaverse, but they did not invent it. They just changed their name for branding purposes to make it seem like they invented it, but it's much bigger than just Facebook. And while there may be something to the conspiracies, nefariousness, and pessimism surrounding the Great Reset and these digital currencies and technologies, I remain pretty optimistic about human nature and our ability to work together to solve problems larger than ourselves. Whenever I worry about the world being a place filled with more evil, darkness than light, I always think back to the fact that we have cars, and they are fairly affordable to buy. Well, maybe not used ones anymore, but you know what I mean. Just think about that for a minute. Think about how much damage we could all be doing every day to each other driving cars. I mean, we could literally crash into people on purpose if they cut us off, but we don't. Well, most of us don't. For the vast majority of people, we all are just trying to make it in this life, find love, be happy, follow our passions, be around the people we enjoy, and leave the world a little bit better. I always choose to believe this over the fear that's shoved in our faces every day, which is why I also have to come clean about something else. As much as I love creating the market updates for you all and sharing the economic news with you, it takes a toll on me. In order for me to bring you my insights, I have to read a lot of negative stories, headlines, and watch a lot of negative YouTube videos to try to weed out the garbage, pick the golden nuggets, and put together a succinct picture for you. I love creating those videos for you all, don't get me wrong, but I find that all the negativity rubs off on me after a while, and I need like a cleanse or a retreat every once in a while. Otherwise, I start looking at the world like it's dark and scary, when in reality, I live in paradise and it's beautiful and amazing outside of my window 99% of the time. So I've been wrestling back and forth over the last few weeks whether to continue doing the reports or if I should change the formats or cover different stories or something so that it's more sustainable for me and the people in my life. And ultimately, I've decided to continue doing them, but not try to be so neutral with the information. Instead, I'm just going to give you more of me, more of my real opinion and interpretation of the information. I may lose some of you as viewers because I might not align with your views or philosophy of the world, and that's okay. I'd love for you to keep watching, but totally understand I wouldn't keep watching a channel if I was disagreeing with everything they said, or maybe I would just to see how I can poke holes in their logic. But for those of you who stay and enjoy my content, you can expect to get more of the real me. My opinions, my flaws, my personality, my humor. It's the only way I can really continue doing this channel sustainably and help the people the best way I know how. If you're still with me, I truly appreciate you sticking with me to the end and hope to start seeing more of your questions, comments, and suggestions for video topics to make for you guys. So please put those in the comments and let me know what you thought of this video and the content, maybe the format, the feel, all of it. And if you have questions or just want to dive into some deep rabbit holes with me, let me know. I respond to all the comments, and my contact info is in the description and pinned comment below if you want to reach out to me directly. I'm always happy to hear from my audience and chat with you or help you in any way that I can. That's it for today's video, and until next time, stay safe, stay positive, and more importantly, stay free.